Welcome to our deep dive into the laws of human nature, a really significant work by Robert Greene.
It definitely is.
If you've ever looked around the world, or let's be honest, maybe even looked inward and felt a bit baffled, wondering why people, and yeah, that includes you listening, act the way they do, well, this book aims to be a guide.
It really tries to pull back the curtain, doesn't it? On those fundamental patterns, the drivers of our behavior that are often operating just beneath the surface, things we don't consciously think about most of the time.
Exactly. Forces hidden in plain sight, you could say.
And it's quite an exploration. It doesn't shy away from the real complexities of human psychology. Greene presents these dynamics almost like universal laws.
Right. These laws that he argues shape pretty much everything from our closest relationships, personal stuff, to how things play out in professional environments, even just making sense of the often bewildering modern world. And our mission here in this deep dive is to take the material you've shared with us, this source material, and really unpack it together.
Yeah, try and distill it.
We want to help you get the most important nuggets of knowledge, the key insights, and get a clear sense of why these ideas actually matter, and maybe how you could even use them in your own life.
So, okay, let's set the stage a bit. What kind of book are we actually talking about here? It's not a quick read, is it? Not a simple list of life hacks.
No, definitely not. Greene's approach is, it's a deep exploration.
Yeah.
Human psychology, human behavior, but all framed within this specific structure of these laws that he argues govern how we operate.
Quite analytical.
Very analytical. It's less about giving you prescriptive rules for every single situation and more about understanding the why behind it all. Why do people do what they do? What are the underlying mechanisms, the motivations driving them?
And he draws really heavily on history, doesn't he? Observations from different cultures, different time periods to illustrate these core concepts.
Yeah, the examples are key. They're not just interesting little stories thrown in. They're meant to be vivid illustrations of these underlying laws actually playing out in the real world.
Right. The idea is, by seeing these patterns pop up again and again across different times and places, you start to get a clearer picture of their fundamental nature. It's less about simple, actionable advice, maybe, and more about developing your own ability to interpret and understand what's going on around you.
And the book makes a really compelling case for why this understanding is so critical, especially now. You might think, in our super techie, supposedly rational modern age, understanding human nature, maybe it's less important, a bit old-fashioned.
But Greene argues completely the opposite.
He really does. He suggests we've never been more subject to these powerful currents of human nature, sometimes in ways that are, frankly, pretty destructive.
And if we ignore that reality, he warns, we're essentially, what was the phrase? Playing with fire.
Yeah. That's stark. And you can really see it playing out, can't you? Especially in the modern world. Think about social media.
I'll go fully. It's like an amplifier for certain aspects of our nature, things we're still really struggling to grapple with.
Greene points out how it's increased the permeability of our emotions, how things can go viral, these emotional waves sweeping through populations almost instantly.
Yeah, and it also makes manipulation easier, doesn't it, for leaders or anyone really. They can tap directly into those emotional currents on a huge scale, playing on our fears, our desires.
And the aggression. Stuff that might have been kept in check face to face.
It's just out there now, in the virtual world.
It's so much easier to let those shadow sides loose, as Greene puts it, when the immediate social consequences seem, less immediate. Or non-existent sometimes.
And don't forget the comparison engine. Our innate tendency to compare, to feel envy, the constant chase for status and attention. Social media has just put that on steroids, hasn't it? With the curated lives, the likes, the validation metric.
Absolutely. It's relentless.
So if you ignore these deep-seated realities, the book argues, you're missing a huge layer of understanding about the forces shaping the world, shaping the people in it.
But there's a promise here too, right? The promise of these laws. Greene suggests they can help you become a master interpreter.
Yeah, a master interpreter of all the cues people are constantly sending out, whether they mean to or not.
That's a powerful idea. Because we're usually in such a rush, aren't we? Quick to judge, fit people into boxes based on first impressions or our own biases.
Or we just buy whatever convenient self-serving story they tell us about why they did something.
Right.
These laws are designed to help you push past that, to see how misleading appearances can be, how easy it is to misread people. The goal is to consciously slow down that snap judgment, to mistrust the immediate surface appearance, and train yourself to actually analyze what might be going on underneath.
Okay, so if we want to develop this more sophisticated lens for understanding others, where does the book suggest we start? Maybe with the biggest challenge of all, understanding ourselves.
Exactly, and that brings us straight to the law of rationality, mastering your emotional self.
Uh,
The book makes a really strong case here. Despite how rational we like to think we are, driven by logic and reason,
mhm.
we are often actually profoundly driven by what Greene calls base emotions. Things like, the hunger for power, that desperate need for attention, the constant pull of money.
And there's that striking example he uses right near the beginning, drawing on Pericles, the observations he made about Athenian politicians way back in 432 BC.
Yeah, that's a great one. Pericles looked at these politicians, and on the surface, they seemed totally rational. They had goals, they had plans, they worked incredibly hard for their factions, they led armies, expanded the empire, brought in tons of money.
All the hallmarks of success and, strategic thinking.
Exactly. But, crucially, when things went wrong, and they always did, eventually, policies backfired, wars turned sour.
Right.
They always had these excellent reasons.
The excuses.
Always. It was the opposition blocking them, or the gods were unfavorable. Some external factor was always to blame. Never their own actions, really.
But Pericles saw this deep contradiction, didn't he? If these guys were all so rational, so logical, why did everything they did collectively add up to so much chaos? So much self-destruction?
Why was Athens, the supposed beacon of democracy, such a complete mess? Why was democracy itself so fragile?
Yeah.
Riddled with corruption, constant turbulence.
Yeah.
And the simple but kind of devastating answer Pericles landed on, according to Greene, was that they weren't really rational at all. They were, quote, merely selfish and shrewd,
Oof.
guided almost entirely by their emotions, their ambition, their envy, their need to control. They could be incredibly tactical, incredibly clever when it came to getting what they wanted, gaining power for themselves.
Under their own ends.
But none of it actually created anything lasting or genuinely served the democracy they were supposed to be leading.
That Pericles example, wow, it still feels so relevant today, doesn't it? You see those same patterns playing out in politics and business all over.
Absolutely.
So if we're all prone to this kind of, let's call it emotional hijacking, what's the solution? What does Greene, drawing from Pericles, actually propose?
Well, Greene describes Pericles' core concept as unique and devastatingly powerful. Pericles believed the human mind fundamentally needs to worship something, to direct its ultimate focus, its highest value, towards some central idea.
Okay.
For most people, Pericles observed, that object of worship was, their ego, their family, their tribe, their god, their nation. Simple stuff, relatively speaking. But for Pericles himself, it was no.
No, that Greek word, it means mind, intelligence.
Yeah, often translated that way. But Greene explains it wasn't just about individual thinking. It was seen as this force that permeates the whole universe, creating meaning and order. And the human mind, Pericles believed, is naturally drawn to this cosmic intelligence. That attraction is the ultimate source of our intelligence. He even embodied the idea in the goddess Athena.
Interesting. So it wasn't about, just trying to crush your emotions.
No, not at all. Greene sees that as basically impossible anyway. It was about achieving a state of balance.
Okay.
It meant cultivating a really clear understanding of why you feel what you feel, becoming conscious of your impulses so your thinking isn't being secretly driven by those underlying emotions.
Right.
The ideal in this vision of rationality is when the energy from your impulses and emotions actually serves your linking self, rather than just taking over and running the show.
And we see this collective irrationality play out on a massive scale, too, right? Not just in ancient Athens. Greene talks about economic bubbles and crashes.
Oh, yeah. The 2008 crash is the obvious recent one, but he points out the exact same patterns repeating throughout history. 1987, 1929, the railway mania in the 1840s, the South Sea bubble way back in the 1720s.
It's the same script, different players.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
The analysis afterwards always focuses on, the structural problems, the technical failures in the system. But Greene argues that fundamentally ignores the basic irrationality driving millions of individuals, buyers, sellers, everyone getting infected with the lure of easy money. Even highly educated, supposedly sophisticated investors just get swept up emotionally.
And they start cherry picking, right? Finding the studies, the experts who tell them what they desperately want to believe.
Classic confirmation bias. You hear those dangerous phrases like, this time it's different, or the absolute certainty that housing prices never go down.
Famous last words.
Always. A wave of what Greene calls unbridled optimism takes hold, blinding everyone to the actual risks. Then comes the panic, the crash, and the ugly confrontation with reality.
And instead of facing that reality, that orgy of speculation that made even supposedly smart people look like idiots.
The finger-pointing starts. Blame the banks, blame the government, blame anything to deflect the real source of the madness.
And this whole pattern of explanation and blame, it just repeats after every single crash. They try to reform the system, pass new laws to limit speculation.
But Greene argues none of it really works in the long run, because the underlying human irrationality, that core emotional driver, isn't fundamentally addressed. It just finds a new outlet next time.
Which highlights this core idea Greene presents, this fundamental split within us humans.
Yeah. He argues that emotions evolve for very different reasons than our cognitive abilities, our thinking minds. And crucially, these two ways of relating to the world aren't, as he puts it, connected seamlessly inside our brains. Not like they might be in animals.
How so?
Well, for animals, emotions tend to function pretty smoothly. They prompt an immediate, usually situation-appropriate response. Danger appears, fear kicks in, animal reacts, danger passes, fear subsides.
Right. Functional.
But for us humans, Greene suggests this split creates constant internal friction. It essentially gives rise to this second emotional self beyond our will, operating somewhat independently.
So unlike an animal, we don't just feel fear and react.
We can dwell on it. We can prolong it, let it fester long after the threat is gone. And the way we communicate emotions gets really tricky too. We might lash out in anger when what we're really feeling underneath is insecurity or fear. Leads to all sorts of misunderstandings, escalating conflicts.
But Greene doesn't just leave us with the diagnosis, does he? He offers a path forward. He suggests acquiring rationality is not complicated, but it definitely takes conscious work.
Right. He outlines a three-step process. The first step is simply becoming aware of what he calls low-grade irrationality.
Low grade. What does that mean exactly?
These are the subtle, continuous moods and feelings humming away just below the level of our conscious awareness. But they're constantly deeply skewing our thinking and our decisions.
Ah, so they create these pronounced biases, the kind you see everywhere across all cultures, all through history.
Exactly. These biases subtly distort how we see reality, leading to recurring mistakes, ineffective decisions. Just becoming aware that these subtle moods are influencing you is the crucial first step. It allows you to start counterbalancing their effects.
Okay, step one, awareness of the subtle stuff. What's step two?
Step two is understanding high-grade irrationality. This is when our emotions get seriously inflamed, often triggered by pressure or specific events.
So like intense anger, overwhelming excitement, consuming resentment, deep suspicion.
Right. When you start thinking about those intense emotions, it actually intensifies them, locking you into what Greene calls a reactive state.
And when you're in that state, everything gets filtered through that one dominant emotion.
Precisely. Everything you see, everything you hear is interpreted only through that narrow emotional lens. You become hypersensitive, more prone to other emotional reactions cascading. Like chronic impatience might bleed into intense anger, or resentment fuels deep distrust.
And these reactive states are where the real problems come from.
Greene highlights them as the source of acute problems. They lead to crises, conflicts, disastrous decisions, whether it's actual violence, manic obsessions, uncontrollable greed, or that overwhelming desire to control other people.
So understanding that this reactive state exists and learning to recognize the signs when you're starting to slip into it, that's crucial.
It's crucial for being able to consciously pull back, take a breath, before we do something we regret.
Now, he mentions a three-step process, but the source material we looked at really only detailed steps 1 and 2 explicitly.
That's right. The implication seems pretty clear, though, doesn't it? That the third step is likely about actively applying that awareness, practicing detachment, making conscious choices based on that understanding in real-world situations.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not spelled out as step 3 in this section.
Okay. So moving from our own internal state to how we perceive others, Greene points out another major trap, appearance bias.
Ah, yes. Our powerful tendency to see people not as they actually are, but simply as they appear to us.
We're so tempted to think, oh yeah, I get the people I deal with. I see them clearly.
But the reality, Greene argues pretty bluntly, is that we see people as they appear, and appearances are, quote, usually misleading.
Why is that? Why are appearances so deceptive?
Well, a couple of key reasons. First, people are constantly, often unconsciously, training themselves to present a specific front. A public persona, right? One that's appropriate for the social situation, one that's likely to be judged positively.
So they seem supportive of noble causes, hardworking, conscientious, all that stuff.
Exactly. And we tend to just take these carefully constructed masks for reality.
And the second reason.
We easily fall prey to the halo effect.
Ah, right. Where if we see one quality we like or dislike.
And we automatically assume other qualities fit that pattern.
Yeah.
So someone who seems socially awkward might be assumed to be less competent. Someone intelligent might be assumed to be ethical. Good-looking people are often seen as more trustworthy, successful people, assumed to be inherently deserving and conscientious.
Even if the reality is completely different.
Completely. And Greene points out this obscures the reality that many people who get ahead might have done so through less than moral actions, which they become very clever at disguising.
So understanding human nature clearly isn't just about decoding other people. It requires a really deep understanding and management of our own attitude as well.
Definitely. And Greene offers the example of the great Russian writer Anton Chekhov as this remarkable model for cultivating both rationality and a really nuanced understanding of people.
Despite a really tough childhood, right? Poor family, alcoholic, abusive father.
Yeah, a difficult start. Yet Greene describes him as becoming fiercely rational. He was a doctor, and he applied that medical training, that diagnostic eye, not just to physical bodies, but to the human animal itself. He aimed to really understand the roots of our irrationality, our unhappiness, our capacity for causing harm.
And Greene suggests Chekhov found this process immensely therapeutic, getting inside his characters.
Yes. Even the worst types, the villains in his stories and plays, his goal was to get inside their heads, understand their perspective, to make sense of them. His approach was to imagine that every single person, no matter how twisted or cruel they seemed, had some internal reason, some logic that made perfect sense to them.
So not just pure evil, but flawed striving.
Exactly. He saw them as striving for some kind of fulfillment, but doing it irrationally, often destructively. By intentionally stepping back, imagining their life story, their internal world from the inside, Chekhov found it demythologized the brutes and aggressors.
Cut them down to human size.
Precisely. And seeing the flawed human behind the monstrous facade, it elicited pity in him rather than just hatred.
That's a really powerful shift in perspective. The lesson Greene draws is we should think more like a writer when dealing with people in our own lives.
Even the ones who seem like the worst sorts. Try to understand their internal logic, their motivations, however flawed they might seem from the outside.
Greene then goes into more detail about how certain negative attitudes develop and show up. He talks about the constricted or negative attitude and the resentful attitude.
Right. The constricted attitude, he suggests, often starts in early childhood. If you face a world that seems frightening and unpredictable and you don't get much comfort or consistent support,
life feels chaotic, uncertain. And we don't handle uncertainty well, especially when we feel vulnerable.
Exactly. So the strategy someone with this attitude adopts is to deliberately narrow their range of experience. Try to reduce the chances of encountering unexpected negative things. They build up these elaborate psychological defenses against different viewpoints, become increasingly self-absorbed.
And they come to expect bad things to happen. Their whole focus is anticipating and neutralizing potential threats.
Pretty much. Trying to maintain a sense of control by minimizing risk. The result, Greene suggests, is this attitude gets more and more entrenched, narrower and narrower over time, making psychological growth nearly impossible.
He adds a little note about dealing with people like this, doesn't he? Don't preach positivity.
Yeah, don't try to cheer them up by telling them how wonderful life is. It often backfires.
Yeah.
He suggests it's more effective to kind of meet them where they are, acknowledge their gloom, but then subtly try to draw them into positive experiences without making a big deal out of it.
Okay. And the resentful attitude.
Greene traces this back to childhood, too. The feeling of never having gotten enough parental love or affection. Always feeling slightly shortchanged, greedy for more attention.
And that carries into adulthood.
As this deep sense of dissatisfaction, disappointment. Always feeling like they aren't getting the recognition or consideration they truly deserve.
And they become hyper-aware of slights.
Experts, he calls them, at scanning faces and behaviors for any hint of disrespect or disdain. They see everything in relation to how they're being treated. Their focus is constantly outward, measuring perceived injustice.
So what's the antidote? How do you counter these negative states?
Greene proposes cultivating what he calls the expansive attitude, actively working to move in the opposite direction.
Which means?
Rediscovering that natural curiosity you probably had as a kid. seeing everything and everyone as a potential source of fascination, continuously seeking to expand your knowledge, your experiences.
And in dealing with people.
You work towards feeling generous, tolerant, even towards difficult people, even
Right.
enemies. You consciously avoid getting trapped in bitterness or rancor. Instead of automatically blaming others or circumstances when things go wrong.
You look honestly at your own role, your attitude, your actions.
Exactly. And you consciously choose to adapt to circumstances instead of just complaining about them. You accept, even embrace, uncertainty and unexpected events as valuable parts of life, sources of learning, growth.
The result, Greene suggests, is your inner self, your soul, kind of expands to meet life, fills with life force.
It's a powerful image.
Okay, switching gears quite a bit now. Greene spends a lot of time on the law of influence, softening people's resistance.
This is a big one. We're constantly needing to move people, aren't we? Get them off a resistant position. We need their help, their cooperation. Maybe we need them to change their behavior somehow.
And our usual methods, they're not great, are they?
Often pretty ineffective, yeah. Flailing around, improvising, pleading, cajoling, trying the guilt trip. Greene points out these tactics usually just make people dig their heels in even more, become more defensive.
And even if you do manage to get what you want that way.
The support you get is thin, he says. There's this undercurrent of resentment. They feel like you've taken something from them, rather than them giving willingly. And they'll be less open next time.
Plus, constantly hitting that wall of resistance, it builds up frustration in us, right? Which subtly poisons our own attitude.
Definitely. So Greene proposes there's a golden key to unlock people's defenses, make them receptive. And that key is creating a genuine feeling of validation.
Validation, okay. And he uses a fantastic case study here. Lyndon Baines Johnson, LBJ's early rise in the Senate.
Yeah, it's brilliant. When LBJ first arrived in 1948, new junior senator from Texas, he went to see the senior senator, Tom Connally, a real power player. Johnson already had this reputation from the House, impatient, brash, pushy.
And he made a mistake right off the bat.
A crucial one, according to Greene. After just a few pleasantries, boom. He lays out his ambition. He wants seats on the top committees, appropriations, finance, foreign relations. And he kind of implies Connally, who was on two of them, should help him just because they're both Texans.
Not understanding the game.
Connally basically thought, this guy clearly does not understand how the Senate works, and decided, as Greene puts it, to put him in his place. Didn't help him at all.
But LBJ learned fast. He adapted.
Dramatically. Instead of pushing, he started catering to the powerful senators, starting with the most powerful, most respected guy, Senator Richard Russell.
How did he approach him?
He was subtle. He actually ignored a couple of Russell's calls at first, maybe built a little anticipation. But when he finally answered, he didn't launch into his own agenda. Not at all.
He just listened.
Intently. For
Okay.
30 minutes straight, Greene says. Showed unusual attentiveness, asked very few questions, said very little himself. He made Russell feel deeply heard, appreciated, respected. That was the validation.
And Greene quotes that maxim here, right? About conversation being more about bringing out the other person's cleverness.
Exactly. The true spirit of conversation consists more in bringing out the cleverness of others than in showing a great deal of it yourself. People want to go away pleased with themselves, feeling smart. They want praise more than instruction.
And it worked with Russell.
Like a charm. Russell became a huge supporter, called LBJ a can-do young man, his only junior senator disciple. Even predicted he'd be president one day.
Wow.
And Johnson cemented it by giving back, helped Russell modernize his staff, gave him access to his own top-notch legal and PR teams, showed his usefulness, strengthened the bond, not just taking, but giving value too.
And he used this same approach with others, like Hubert Humphrey.
Yeah, Humphrey was another interesting case. Liberal, charismatic, but he'd alienated colleagues, felt ostracized, depressed. In 51, Greene says Johnson just approaches him on the subway, suggests they ride together, talk. To Humphrey, feeling down, it was like music, even if he doubted the sincerity initially.
And when it came to actually getting bills passed, dealing with resistant senators...
Relentless, but subtle. Endless drinks in his office, wit, charm, calls at all hours. But Greene emphasizes he never argued with vehemence, never tried to force the issue. He always made a point of seeing their side and was always ready with numerous quid pro deals.
And eventually they'd relent.
Yeah, and Greene notes LBJ became someone to fear, not because he was overtly threatening, but because holding out against him meant he could make your life subtly miserable with his relentless, validating approach.
So the deeper psychology here, it's about tapping into that fundamental need people have.
To feel confirmed and validated. When you provide that, they don't feel manipulated or pushed. They feel understood, seen.
And once they do you a favor based on that
They
feeling,
tend to keep helping you. Why? Because Green suggests in doing something for you, they've implicitly judged you worthy. To stop helping would mean questioning their own judgment, their own intelligence. And people are very reluctant to do that.
and doing this slowly, subtly, within a group.
Like Johnson mastered, yeah. It lets you expand your influence hugely without ever seeming overtly aggressive or even purposeful. Green calls it the ultimate disguise for your ambitions.
And a specific technique related to this is strategic flattery.
Right. But the key, Green says, is that flattery works best when it targets qualities people are secretly uncertain about in themselves.
Not the obvious stuff, praising a terrible basketball player's skills. That just sounds fake.
Exactly. Rings false. But if someone is maybe a bit insecure about something, they think they're not really that bad at it, or they wish they were better, then flattery focused right on that specific point of uncertainty can be incredibly effective.
He gives the Richelieu example, right? The statesman who fancied himself a poet.
Yeah. Cardinal Richelieu, brilliant statesman, but had this idle vanity about his poetry. Skillful flatterers, Green notes, wouldn't talk much about state affairs or only briefly, but they'd lavish praise specifically on his poems. This incense, as Green calls it, would turn his head in their favor.
So the tactic is observe carefully, find that subtle insecurity, and offer reassurance.
Precisely.
Understanding influence and reactions naturally leads into decoding nonverbal communication, another critical skill Green really emphasizes.
Absolutely. And he uses the example of Milton Erickson, the famous psychiatrist. Suggests Erickson became so incredibly skilled at reading people because polio left him unable to participate normally in conversations, so he was forced to just watch intensely.
Focusing purely on the nonverbal cues.
Everything. Hand gestures, tiny eyebrow raises, shifts in voice pitch, folding arms. He noticed pulsating veins in his sister's necks, signaling nervousness. Became fascinated by breathing patterns. Certain rhythms indicated boredom, predictably followed by a yawn.
Even small things like hair movements.
Yeah. Green recounts that a deliberate brushback could mean impatience, like, okay, heard enough. But a quicker, unconscious stroke often meant rapt attention.
And this observation wasn't just about reading minds, right? Erickson used it therapeutically.
Yeah, Green gives that example of the man paralyzed after a stroke, constantly crying. Erickson just put sandpaper and wood in his hands. The man became enthralled with the sanding, stopped crying, took up woodworking.
Altering the physical changed the mental state.
Exactly. It seemed to unlock something. Green also notes Erickson became acutely sensitive to differences in nonverbals between men and women, seeing how they reflected different thinking patterns. Particularly attuned to women's mannerisms, maybe from watching his sisters. Green writes he could dissect every nuance.
He even used it when assessing patients, that lint-picking example.
Right. A beautiful young woman comes in, talking vaguely, seen other psychiatrists, but Erickson subtly clocks her picking invisible lint off her sleeve. A tiny cue, but significant to him.
So Green gives us specific signals to look for, starting with dislike or hostility.
Yeah, the clear signs we often notice when it's pretty strong. Sudden squinting, a glare, lips pursed tight, stiff neck, torso or feet turned away, arms folded, general body tension.
But the challenge is you often only see those when it's too late, when the displeasure is too strong to hide.
Exactly. To get really good, you need to train yourself to spot the subtle stuff. The micro-expressions, those fleeting involuntary facial movements and other less obvious physical tells that leak out before the emotion is fully formed or consciously displayed.
Okay, and on the flip side, identifying liking, comfort, interest. That's crucial for influence, right? Or seduction.
Essential.
Yeah.
Best way to gauge if someone's becoming receptive, falling under your spell, as Green puts it. Signs of comfort. Standing closer, leaning in, arms relaxed, not folded or tense.
And signs of attention when you're talking.
Frequent head nods, attentive gaze, genuine smiles, those often signal agreement that resistance is lowering, exchanging more frequent looks. But Green says the best and most exciting sign of all is synchrony.
Synchrony, like mirroring.
Exactly. When the other person unconsciously starts mirroring your body language, it can be subtle, crossing their legs the same way, tilting their head similarly, matching your smile.
Erickson even noticed breathing patterns syncing up.
At the deepest levels, yeah. A connection so profound, Green writes, it could sometimes end in the complete synchrony of a kiss.
Wow, okay. And nonverbals also signal confidence and power dynamics.
Hugely powerful indicators. Green suggests true confidence often shows up as greater relaxation, visible in the face, allows more freedom of movement.
And people feeling powerful, they act differently.
They tend to feel allowed to look around more, choose who they make eye contact with. Their eyelids might be more closed, conveying seriousness, competence. They might show boredom or annoyance more freely.
They smile less. Interesting.
Yeah, Greene suggests frequent or excessive smiling can actually signal overall insecurity. Powerful people often smile less. They also feel more entitled to touch people, friendly pats, etc., and they take up more space, create more distance in meetings or conversations.
Posture taller, gestures relaxed.
Right. And crucially, others often feel subtly compelled to imitate their style and mannerisms. The leader subtly imposes their nonverbal style. Others mimic their energy, their composure. But Greene stresses fake confidence is usually obvious and off-putting. Real confidence comes from genuine inner relaxation.
And finally, decoding deception through nonverbals.
Greene suggests deceivers try to distract you, either a cover-up or a smooth, soft sell. They might use an overly animated face, exaggerated gestures. Could be genuine excitement, sure, but could also be a facade hiding something, especially with strangers or people with a motive to hide things.
So you need to be on guard and look for inconsistencies.
Exactly. Look for tension or anxiety in other parts of the face or body that don't match the outward performance. Often they make one part more expressive to draw your attention. There's the mouth area is easiest to manipulate. Big smiles, changing expressions quickly, or exaggerated hand gestures.
But the tell is the tension elsewhere. That's where the truth leaks out.
That's the key sign Greene points to. Look for the mismatch.
This understanding of how people present themselves, consciously or not, leads Greene into a deeper concept. Understanding character. He uses that powerful metaphor, the engraving within us.
Yeah. We often feel like fate or circumstances control us, right? But Greene offers a different perspective. Actually, it's often our character that controls us.
And the word itself, character, comes from Greek, meaning an engraving tool.
Right, like something deeply ingrained or stamped within us. A fundamental pattern compelling us to act in certain ways, often way below our conscious awareness or control. Greene mentions it has 3 essential layered components giving it depth, though the specifics aren't detailed in this excerpt.
And he makes a crucial point about weak character, says it can neutralize everything else.
Yeah, even the most impressive qualities. High intelligence, creativity, charm. If someone has weak character, Greene suggests they'll likely crumble under pressure, won't take criticism well, will only think of their own agenda, or their arrogance, their annoying traits will just drive people away, poisoning the environment.
So there are hidden costs to working with or hiring people like that, even if they seem talented on the surface.
Significant hidden costs. He contrasts this with someone maybe less dazzling, less overtly intelligent, but who has strong character. Says they're far more reliable, more productive in the long run. He concludes that people of real strength are as rare as gold.
Building on that, he introduces this fascinating idea, the alchemy of weakness, transforming flaws into strengths.
Right. He uses that compelling example of the unnamed actress. She carried all these childhood insecurities into adulthood. Small, timid, plain, bad teeth, awkward, shy, passive, hypersensitive, desperately needed attention and love.
Hollywood should have crushed someone like that.
Easily. Ruthless environment. But instead, through introspection, through conscious work, she turned those exact weaknesses into the pillars of an incredibly successful 40-year career.
How did she do that?
She channeled her sadness, her feelings of betrayal, into her roles. Audiences identified with that authenticity. It felt real compared to more superficial actresses. She directed that desperate need to be loved towards the camera, and audiences felt it, connected with her vulnerability.
He saw directors as father figures.
Yeah, adored and respected them. And her hypersensitivity, instead of being just painful, she turned it outward, developing these incredibly fine antennae tuned in to directors' likes and dislikes.
So she could sense displeasure without being told, ask the right questions, incorporate criticism quickly.
Became a director's dream, Greene says. And she coupled all that adaptability with fierce willpower, built this astonishingly long career.
And Greene suggests we can apply this alchemy to ourselves.
Yes. If you're a hyper-perfectionist, a control freak, redirect that energy into productive work, not controlling people. Attention to detail, high standards, those are positives if channeled right.
If you're a pleaser, always seeking approval.
You've likely developed great courtier skills, charm. Understand the source, often defensive, gain control over the compulsive part, and use it consciously as a genuine social skill for influence.
Highly sensitive, take things personally.
Redirect it outward into active empathy. Connects back to that law of irrationality, being more porous to others' emotions, transforms the flaw into an asset for positive social connection.
Rebellious character, dislike convention.
Channel it into innovative work, challenging outdated ideas instead of just compulsively insulting people.
The core idea being, for each weakness, there's a corresponding strength.
Exactly. Don't eliminate the weakness, understand it, control its negative side, and channel its energy productively to unlock the strength.
Moving on, Greene gets into the law of desire, the pleasure of the chase.
Illustrated by Coco Chanel's amazing comeback after WWIOI. She was 70 years old.
Opened a new fashion house, but faced negativity initially. Critics, public, weren't buying it.
Right. And Greene explains her strategy was brilliant. She focused on generating desire, not just selling products. She deliberately linked her brand to things slightly illicit, unconventional, politically advanced to the time, that overt androgynous appeal flouting traditional gender roles.
She played into the generation gap, contrasting with the stodgy previous generation.
Yeah. Greene even suggests she tapped into a secret resentment of the father figure, a transgressive desire to get rid of him. Uses the JFK versus Eisenhower era as an example. Youth, vigor, rejecting the old guard's masculinity.
And her approach to piracy to copycats, that was revolutionary.
Totally counterintuitive. Instead of fighting it, she welcomed everyone to shows, allowed photos, even invited wealthy women seamstresses to copy her designs.
Why on earth would she do that?
Greene argues it was about more than money for her. Her deeper drive was to spread her fashions everywhere. She wanted to feel her work become objects of desire by women of all classes and nations.
Like ultimate revenge for her childhood, feeling ignored, unloved.
Exactly. Clothe millions, see her imprint everywhere. Constant affirmation.
And this illustrates the core principle of desire.
It is not possession, but desire that secretly impels people. Possession, getting what you want, always gives a little disappointment, right? The fantasy rarely matches reality, and that quickly sparks desire for something new.
So you prey on that need for fantasies, the pleasure of the chase itself.
Precisely.
See?
But your efforts have to be continually renewed. Once people feel they have what they want or they fully possess you, Greene warns, your value drops. The respect lessens.
So to maintain power, influence, you have to keep things interesting.
Keep withdrawing, surprising, and stimulating the chase. Never let them feel they fully have you or understand you.
Greene also tackles a heavy topic, the law of mortality, embracing our shared fate.
Yeah, he argues our fundamental avoidance of thinking about death sets the pattern for how we handle all unpleasantness, all adversity.
So when faced with difficulty, instead of confronting it,
We become hysterical, lose balance, blame others, feel angry, feel sorry for ourselves, seek distractions, pain dullers, anything to avoid the reality.
and this avoidance becomes a habit, leading to anxiety, emptiness.
A generalized anxiety, yeah, comes from constantly running away from reality.
He uses the Flannery O'Connor example here, right? The writer diagnosed with lupus.
Very poignant example. Diagnosed young, age 26, given only a few years, already suffering severe arthritis pain. And initially, her protected mother and doctors hid the truth from her.
But a friend eventually told her, and her reaction wasn't despair.
It was relief. After trembling for a moment, Greene recounts, she said something like, "Well, that's not good news, but I can't thank you enough for telling me. I thought I had lupus and I thought I was going crazy. I'd rather be sick than crazy."
Wow. Choosing harsh reality over terrifying uncertainty.
Exactly. She had to return home, Georgia, leave the stimulating literary world behind. Worried her mind would stagnate. But confronting mortality forced deep thought, clarified her priorities. Writing mattered most, more than friends, location, health. She realized she had stories left to tell.
She saw the forced return as a blessing in disguise, part of some other plan.
Yeah. And she had to cope with crushing loneliness, needed company, depended on visitors for material. As her fame grew, visitors came and she poured every ounce of her energy into observing her visitors and plumbing their depths for her stories, turned the difficult circumstance into creative fuel.
So Greene argues we need to shake ourselves out of this denial, look at mortality without flinching.
Not just a quick abstract thought, focus on the uncertainty. Death could come tomorrow. So could adversity, separation. Stop postponing awareness.
And stop feeling superior or special. Recognize it's a shared fate.
That shared vulnerability, he argues, should bind us empathetically. We're all in the brotherhood and sisterhood of death.
And instead of avoiding pain, lean into challenges. Life isn't meant to be easy.
Find dignity in suffering, he suggests. Be tough, resilient, and accepting. He concludes that avoiding mortality means avoiding a part of ourselves. Confronting it brings awareness of life's brevity, sparks urgency, a desire to realize your potential, express yourself, avoid wasting time, gives life intensity.
Okay, next up. Navigating the group dynamic. The law of tribalism.
We are fundamentally social creatures, right? With this primal need to belong. We're deeply tuned into what others in our group feel, this urgent need to fit in and play a role.
We unconsciously imitate gestures, expressions, especially leaders.
Yeah. We still hunt in packs, he says, whether it's venting anger on social media or aligning politically. We have rituals, religious, political spectacles, even warfare that tighten those bonds. We feel that collective energy.
But the answer isn't just mindless rebellion, rebelling for its own sake.
No, Greene argues that's equally mindless, self-destructive, just gets you marginalized.
So the goal is group intelligence.
Yeah. Understanding how groups affect our thinking and emotions so we can resist that downward pull of groupthink or irrationality, and understanding how groups operate, the dynamics, the laws, so we can navigate them effectively.
It's a delicate dance. Outwardly fit in, inwardly maintain distance.
Be gifted social actors on the surface, he says, but inwardly keep that mental space to think for yourself. That independence is crucial for making decisions right for you, not just dictated by the group.
And groups often define themselves against an enemy, a bogeyman.
Very common dynamic. To navigate that, you need to detach, see the enemy clearly, minus the group's distortions and projections. But don't overtly display your skepticism looks like disloyalty. Keep your mind open inwardly to resist the downward pull and overreactions. Greene even suggests trying to learn from the enemy, adapt their superior strategies if they have any.
Challenging the group's core ideas is hard, isn't it? We tend to go along.
Very hard. That ingrained conformity, Greene warns, can make you lose the ability to reason independently, your most prized possession. He suggests a thought experiment. Deliberately entertain ideas opposite to your group's view. See if there's value against the grain.
So inward independence doesn't mean being cut off.
Not all. Outwardly fit in. Inwardly scrutinize the group's ideas. Compare them to your own experience. Adapt what has merit. Reject what doesn't. Focus on the ideas, not just who said them.
Become an anthropologist of groups. Study the culture, the feel.
Yeah, observe like an outsider. Catch that social force molding the group into an organism, something greater than the sum of its parts.
And modern tribalism, it's different. Smaller tribes online.
Often, yeah. Forming smaller tribes for a greater narcissistic boost, viewing larger groups with suspicion. Social media fuels this, spreading narrow views virally in echo chambers. But these tribes often don't last. They shift, regroup, split, leaving that need to belong never satisfied, which drives us mad.
And the danger is combining primitive tribalism with modern tech.
Exactly. Ancient group bonding could lead to extinction now, he suggests. When a tribe feels threatened, there's little middle ground. Battles become more intense, more violent, amplified by technology.
He also mentions the court dynamic. You can't just opt out.
Trying to seem superior to the politicking just makes you look suspicious, gets you marginalized. Often better, he suggests, to become a consummate courtier yourself. Understand the game, play it skillfully. Be aware of the different types of courtiers and the dangers of the aggressive, clever, conscienceless ones, though he doesn't detail types in this excerpt. This understanding leads into creating collective purpose within a group.
Contrasting dysfunctional cultures with productive ones.
Right. Dysfunctional leaders get dragged down by infighting, gamesmanship, feeling vulnerable. They surround themselves with yes men, courtiers, creating a court cocoon.
Hatching bad plans encouraged by spineless courtiers.
Exactly. And firing people often doesn't fix it. The culture infects the next person. The solution, Greene argues, is fixing the overall group dynamic. Create a productive culture, avoid the evils, trigger an upward pull.
And the key is making people feel part of something important, creating something meaningful together.
Taps into a deep human need. When members feel that collective purpose, they're motivated to keep the dynamic healthy. High esprit de corps means the group polices itself. Petty, ego-driven people stand out, get isolated.
Clarity on purpose, clarity on roles, reduces faction.
Makes everything easier and smoother. But the huge caveat, you must practice what you preach. Hypocrisy destroys it instantly.
Establish a track record reflecting the ideal, and keep reminding the group of the mission, especially after success.
Yeah, groups drift. Keep adapting the mission if needed, but don't lose sight of the core purpose. Humans have that baser, selfish side, Greene reminds us, but also a nobler, higher side, often frustrated today. Collective purpose taps into that higher side.
Okay, let's talk about developing authority, creating that aura of command.
And Greene stresses this is way beyond just using force or manipulation.
Yeah.
He uses Queen Elizabeth I as a fantastic example.
Her position was incredibly fragile when she took the throne, right? Young, no credibility, weak country, no experience, pressure to marry.
Extremely fragile. Her initial public strategy: appear regal, confident, use pageantry, symbols, control her image, and delayed marriage to avoid dependence on a husband. But with her ministers, powerful, experienced men with big egos, naturally feeling superior to a young woman, it was much trickier. She needed their help but couldn't seem too dependent.
So her approach was?
All business, outworked everyone, cut court expenses drastically, even her own income, signaling focus on England, not personal gain, demonstrated superior knowledge, especially finance, showed a tough side in negotiations.
Flashed anger if they pursued personal agendas.
Yeah, controlled but intimidating outbursts. Made them feel vital, but subtly shows she didn't ultimately need any single one of them. The result: her will prevailed over their agendas. They came to fear losing her.
And when authority like that is established, ambivalence is manageable. Doubts, envy, people forgive mistakes faster.
Exactly. Enough trust is built. They dread what happens without you. Disunity, confusion, bad decisions. Their need for you becomes strong.
So cultivating this involves self-reflection. How do people react to you now? Are you facing resistance? Are your ideas ignored?
Yeah, reflect on your effect. Then develop habits, strategies to project authority, especially for aspiring leaders. Doing it early creates an impressive and appealing aura, makes it seem like you are destined to be powerful. If you're already a leader, it strengthens authority, connection.
And the absolute essence of authority, Greene argues, is vision. He uses Xenophon and the 10,000.
Right. Most people, Greene says, are locked in the moment. Overreacting, panicking in crisis, seeing only narrow reality, unable to see alternatives or prioritize under pressure.
But those who maintain presence of mind, elevate perspective, see the bigger picture.
They cultivate a third eye. Seeing unseen forces, trends, they naturally fulfill the leadership function, create an aura of authority by seeming to possess the godlike ability to read the future. And Greene insists this isn't magic. It's a power that can be practiced, developed, applied anywhere.
The Xenophon example. Greek mercenaries trapped deep in Persia, commanders killed, soldiers panicking.
Total chaos. But Xenophon kept calm, saw the wider picture. Persia wasn't united against them, they weren't totally cut off, offered a clear strategic vision, marched north to the Black Sea.
Despite having no military experience, his vision and confidence were enough.
The soldiers were desperate, they nominated him leader. Took years, incredible hardship, but his rational, elevated vision got them home. Proof of the power of clear-sighted thinking.
Greene gives key strategies for this. First, set the tone early.
Critical. First impressions stick. Trying later looks forced. Show initial toughness. Set fair limits. Punish unmet standards firmly but fairly. Tone. Peremptory, bold. People respect strength if it's not abusive.
Second, lead from the front.
Be the first to do the hard stuff. Elizabeth cutting expenses. Shackleton killing the cat when food ran out. Sets the example, inspires confidence, creates bonds, earns respect.
Third, the crucial taboo. Never appear to take, always to give.
Taking something people feel they have money, rights, even time without justification creates insecurity, questions your legitimacy, stirs doubts. What else will you take? Abusing power, fooling us. Even hints hurt your reputation.
So if sacrifices are needed, you go first. And not just symbolically.
Absolutely. Frame loss as temporary if possible. Promise restoration. Elizabeth's careful resource management allowed her to be generous, strengthening her authority immensely. Okay, moving into some deeper, maybe darker territory now. The law of aggression. Owning your dark side.
Right. Greene starts by saying aggression is natural, fundamental. We're born with this powerful energy, willpower, assertiveness, aggression, mixed with intelligence.
You see it purest in childhood, right?
Right.
Kids are bold, adventurous, relentless, solving problems or getting what they want, open, combative, if frustrated.
And aggression has both positive and negative sides. Willpower versus antisocial behavior.
Two sides of the same coin, he argues. We can all slip into the negative side. It's a continuum of human aggression.
And the problems come from unawareness, acting out negatively without realizing it, or repressing it and becoming passive-aggressive.
Exactly. Repressing assertive impulses, trying to seem humble. That energy leaks out anyway, often passive-aggressively. You can't just deny it. It finds an outlet. Awareness is key to control and channeling it productively.
Where does this aggression come from? Nature or nurture?
Greene suggests both. Maybe an inborn tendency, the greedy baby analogy. Some adults just have a greater need to control, brood, exaggerate threats, overreact. But early family life is huge too. Domineering parents repressing a child's power can lead to adults who tyrannize. Abused children might become abusers. Overly compliant parents might produce kids who never learned limits, become relentless grabbers.
He uses Rockefeller Sr. to illustrate the aggressor's trap.
Yeah. Rockefeller's ruthless rise. Using inside info on railroad rebates, SIC, to get lower costs, then leveraging that to force competitors to sell or go broke.
But his approach was framed as rational, helping them out.
Always. Presented as doing them a favor. Business is unpredictable, Cleveland refiners disadvantaged, prices fluctuate, offered to consolidate, give them money before they inevitably went bust, which he insisted was certain to happen because of the SIC.
He played mind games, too, like with Mr. Payne.
Right. Bought only Payne's refinery initially, making Payne think the SIC wasn't so powerful, so he gave a fair deal. Payne didn't realize Rockefeller wanted him to think that. With another guy, Fawcett, the pitch was slightly more ominous, emphasizing their certain doom.
And the trap is?
The more power aggressors get, the more vulnerabilities, rivals, enemies they create, which sparks a need for even more aggression and power to defend it. They get addicted, trapped, can't easily change. Greene's advice, never be naive, they will be relentless. If they seem to back off, it's only temporary.
And we tend to deny our own aggression. It's always the other person.
Classic denial. Greene stresses we must accept it's in all of us. Awareness is essential for progress.
Passive aggression gets special attention. Asserting self indirectly.
Very common. Often comes from fear of confrontation, need to seem polite, or just needing release from feeling deferential.
The strategies. Slow responses, subtle digs and praise. Poisonous praise. Neutral words, but upset tone face to stir guilt.
Right. The goal. Make you doubt yourself, feel guilty. Masters of blame shifting, bringing up old stuff, accusing you of hostility when you react, might be nice to others to isolate you.
And countering it. Recognize it's often conscious. They're cunning tyrants.
Not weak or helpless. Focus on the manipulations, the harshness underneath. Detach emotionally that neutralizes their power over your mind. But he warns, if they're a superior and hypersensitive to your distance, it might get worse. Sometimes quitting is the only real counter. No position is worth such abuse.
So the goal isn't eliminating aggression, but controlled aggression, channeling it productively.
Exactly. Reclaiming that childhood fearlessness. Timidity is acquired, he argues. Fears mount, confidence drops, worry about perception, fear conflict. Backing down becomes habit, fail to set boundaries, hard to ask for things. Losing that bold spirit is losing a vital part of yourself. Painful. Reclaim natural fearlessness.
Okay, shifting focus again. Sensing the times, the law of generational patterns.
Understanding the zeitgeist. History moves in cycles. Change is constant. Many fear change, cling to the past, band together to stop the tide. Leaders cling to old ideas. Others just get carried along, uncomprehending.
You need power, like Danton during the French Revolution, to make sense of it, act accordingly.
Greene uses Danton's story powerfully. Watching Louis XVI's coronation as a boy, saw the huge ornate carriage, the carrosse, seemed too large, too bright, like it swallowed him up, sensed a disconnect. Magnificent or grotesque, felt strange images, head spinning, foreshadowing the monarchy's disconnect.
Then in Paris later, he sensed the growing discontent, while the king remained blind.
Utterly blind. Louis XVI tried asserting authority at the Estates General in 1789. Believed only he knew best. Delegates were rowdy kids. Planned the Versailles meeting to awe them with majesty, remind them of Louis XIV. Ignored warnings about Paris agitators nearby. Thought the middle class would be impressed.
Backfired spectacularly.
Hugely. King seemed small, detached. People saw decadence, demanded he return to Paris. Mob marched on Versailles, killed guards, forced family back. Louis saw heads on pikes. Total shock. Lost connection. Dignity. Authority. Because he was incapable of sensing the shift, had no feel for the times. Stuck in the past.
While Danton felt the wild spirit of the streets, embodied the new spirit.
Exactly. Used his oratory to lead the revolution. But Danton's story also shows losing touch. Later felt guilt over the terror, became less engaged. Rival Robespierre noticed, spread rumors. Danton lost fervor. Danton lost election to Committee of Public Safety. Robespierre gained power. Danton no longer embodied the spirit of the times. Robespierre seized the moment, eliminated him.
So vision in this sense is looking differently, dropping cliches, habits.
Stop moralizing, judging. Just see things as they are. Look for undercurrents of discontent and disharmony, always there below the surface. Find connections among the signs.
Slowly, the flow, the tide itself, comes into focus, reveals the hidden direction.
That's the idea, a power you can practice and develop.
So gauging the spirit of the present, sense the mood. Wild, cautious, cynical, hopeful. And where your generation fits.
Right. He gives examples of generational patterns. Silent generation, depression, WWII, cautious, conservative, baby boomers, 60s, reacted against conformity, valued expression, idealism. Gen X reacted against that, became cynical, practical, each shaped by formative experiences. Implies we're in a crisis period now, but they don't last. New values gestate.
And becoming a trendsetter involves being an archaeologist of your generation, digging into the past.
Piece together the underlying spirit. Examine memories with distance. Avoid good-bad judgments about generations. Skill developed through practice.
The result, more than follower or rebel. You mold your own relationship to the zeitgeist, become a formidable trendsetter yourself.
Another powerful law, gender rigidity. Reconnecting to the masculine-feminine within.
Greene argues we all have both masculine and feminine qualities, genetic, influenced by parents.
Yes. But the need for a consistent social identity, conforming to gender roles, makes us repress qualities associated with the opposite role. We over-identify with the expected one.
And the price. Lose valuable character dimensions, thinking gets rigid, relationships suffer.
Yeah, projecting fantasies, hostilities onto the opposite sex. The goal, Greene says, is awareness and reconnection. Become aware of lost traits. Slowly reconnect.
This unleashes creative power, makes thinking more fluid, fascinates people.
Because you're being more authentically you, his advice is striking. Do not play the expected gender role, but rather create the one that suits you.
He uses Katerina Sforza, the beautiful warrior countess, as an example. Her power came from blending masculine-feminine.
Exactly. Husband brutal, ineffective. Katerina managed defenses, alliances, crises. When he was assassinated, she asserted command, refused to surrender her castle.
The scene on the ramparts? Assassins holding her kids hostage? She used femininity first.
Seemed to fear them, voice breaking, begged her commander to surrender. But Greene says it was a game, talking in code, a performance.
Then, facing the threat to her kids, showed masculine toughness. Lifted her skirts.
Yelled something like, "Fools, don't you see I'm here? I have the means to make more children." Defiantly showed she could replenish heirs, making the kids less valuable as leverage. Assassins dumbfounded. She regained power.
But she lost this balance later, with her lover, Giacomo Feo.
Fell hopelessly in love. Under immense pressure, bad husband, pregnancies, politics. Feo's adoration was a respite. She started relinquishing power, control, for love.
Escape, narrowing herself to devoted wife, repressed her expansive character. Got depressed.
Yeah. Learn the lesson. Stay true to her multifaceted self, play many roles, blend masculine, feminine as needed. Later use feminine wiles strategically against Cesar Borgia to buy time for allies.
Greene goes deeper into love and projection. Falling in love. Opposite traits emerge. Strong become helpless, nurturing become tyrannical.
Often happens. He traces it to the deep influence of the opposite sex parent in childhood. We unconsciously internalize their qualities, positive and negative. Association charged with emotions, physical, sensual, excitement, fascination, disappointment, fear.
Then as we separate, forge identity around gender roles. We repress traits associated with the opposite parent.
Boys, ambivalent to mother, crave security versus feel suffocated, over-identify with toughness, repress empathy, connection, the anima sinks into unconscious. Girls, ambivalent to father, crave approval versus fear power. Identify with feminine, repress masculine traits like aggression, independence, strategy. The animus sinks.
And in adulthood, we seek partners who remind us of that parent, or embody our repressed anima animus.
Which triggers powerful, confusing emotions. We act like person B, hysterical, needy, obsessive, controlling, because we're relating to our projections, not the real person.
Leads to disappointment, blame, miscommunication, cycle repeats.
He details specific projections. Male. The adoring mother type. Seeks woman to play mother role. Comfort. Ego boost. Often from adoring mother who compensated for husband's lack of attention. Man becomes ambitious, live up to mom's expectations, subtly positions partner as mother figure.
Woman resents manipulation, stalks soothing. Man blames her for changing, not seeing his projection, Breakup, painful, feels like mother abandoning him. Even if she plays the role, he might resent dependency, sabotage it. His anima has a sharp, recriminating edge.
Female projections. The devilish romantic. Fascinated by man. Older. Successful rake, but romantic. Decides she can seduce, reform him, bask in his love.
Reality. He's not as imagined, self-absorbed. Attention fades. Can't be reformed, leaves her.
Or the superior man. Seems brilliant, skilled, strong, stable, businessman, professor, guru. Self-assurance attractive, even if not physically. The woman feels indirect strength superiority through him. Uses Dorothea Brooke from Middlemarch. Ignores eligible young man for older, less attractive scholar Casaubon, projecting ideals onto his intellect status.
So strategies for balancing these qualities. For the masculine style, overly tough, avoids vulnerability.
Confront the need to be strong all the time. Accept limitations, past pain. Lower defenses, become more porous to others' emotions. Analytic empathy. Develop patience for indirect communication. Stop tying self-esteem to every success. Examine setbacks honestly. Ask for help, feedback. Habit. Weakness is inability to learn. Lower self-opinion, not as great as you imagine. Spurs improvement.
And for the feminine style, overly sensitive, low self-esteem, fears conflict.
Avoid beating self up after failure. Introspection can go too far. Stop ascribing success only to others. Low self-esteem is acquired, often from internalizing critical animus voices, like men judging looks, intelligence. Catch and shed those. Don't let failure or criticism paralyze you. It narrows learning. Need more masculine self-confidence without the stupidity. Drop automatic emotional responses. See from distance. Train self not to take things personally. Finally, the inner voice, finding your sense of purpose.
Contrasted with the usual distracting mind. Thoughts circling anxieties, fantasies, resentments. Continuous loop, only half listening.
Right. Events like foreign travel can snap senses alive, force attention. But Greene suggests there's a more consistent way. Connect to an inner guidance system, an inner voice, distinct from ego or others' voices.
Uses Martin Luther King Jr.'s crisis moment.
Yeah.
Montgomery bus boycott, age 26. Threats, overwhelmed, doubts, inherited religion, no personal connection to God yet. Panic.
Yeah. Prayed urgently. Lord, I must confess I'm weak, faltering, losing courage. Couldn't let people see. Then heard a voice clear as could be. Martin Luther, stand up for righteousness, justice, truth. And lo, I will be with you. Felt sure it was God.
Promised never to leave, huge relief, burden lifted, cried, inner resolve solidified, connected him to his purpose.
Greene says this inner voice isn't the ego. Wants tension, quick gratification divides. It absorbs you in your work, what you must do. Hard to hear initially, head full of others' voices. Needs introspection, effort, practice.
Following it leads to positive things. Inner strength, less swayed by others. Connects to larger goals, more strategic, focused, adaptive.
Yes. Once heard, no going back. Course set, deviating causes anxiety, pain.
Engaging it neutralizes negative emotions from aimlessness. Boredom from practice becomes okay. Knowing benefits. Learning excites.
Don't crave distractions. Mind absorbed in work. Flow. Deep focus builds momentum. Retain info better, emotional engagement, faster learning, creative energy. Mind-teaming ideas come to us out of nowhere. Reaching creative levels satisfying, easier to add new skills.
Finding purpose involves two tasks. First, awareness of purpose's primary role, its gravitational pull. Observe others, what guides them. Freedom, pleasure, money, attention, power, cause.
And identify false purposes lead to obsession, dead ends. Avoid hiring working with those driven by false purpose. Drag you down.
Second task, find and elevate your purpose. If young, use it as framework for energy. Explore, have adventures, but within framework. Most important, accumulate skills. If older astray, use existing skills. Gently channel towards inclinations. Avoid sudden, impractical changes.
He elaborates on false purposes, money and success. Motivates many, see finding calling as a waste of time, often impractical long-term.
Enter fields for money. No connection to inclinations. Fields crowded, fierce competition.
Might do well temporarily, but grow restless, bored, need new challenges. Make mistakes in obsessive pursuit, short-term thinking like 2008 derivatives. Uses Chanel again, found calling. Design, needed business help. Targeted Boy Capel, wealthy, practical. His false purpose, money, funded her first shops. His ruthlessness, her creativity, his false purpose served her true one. She learned from him without being sidetracked by just money.
He also touches on assessing inner toughness. Need to gauge it before crisis.
Yeah. Simple methods. Give challenging tasks, shorter deadlines, see response, rise to occasion, better under stress, treasure. Lead team in novel, slightly risky action. Observe reactions to chaos and certainty. reviews strength lack after crises failures, can tolerate a few fearful types with other virtues, but not too many.
Okay, wrapping up with the power of the shadow. Integrating your dark side.
Everyone has a dark side, he says. Less desirable traits, impulses, often repressed, can manifest destructively if unaware, like with Nixon.
Nixon's paranoia, anger at enemies, press leaks, reaction to anti-war demos, red hot with anger, talking revenge, nut cutters.
Yeah. Anxious about public image, badgering staff to promote strong leadership, minimize Kissinger's credit, worried what elites thought, wanted landslide in 1972, suspected opponent O'Brien had tricks, railed at Haldeman to spy, get dirt, assemble nut cutters for dirty work.
Greene argues the source was not being his complete self, always playing a role. Energy to suppress unpleasantness leaks out.
Exactly. Paranoia, anger, neediness stemmed from repression. Not acknowledging parts of himself meant they manifested uncontrollably, negatively. Greene says subjecting your own dark side to conscious scrutiny loses its destructive power.
So detect signs in self-channeled dark energy productively. Neediness, empathy, aggression, worthwhile causes. Admit ambitions, not act guiltily, stealthily.
Monitor suspicious tendencies, projection. See selfish, harmful impulses in yourself. Realize you're not as angelic, strong as you imagine. Awareness brings balance, greater tolerance for others.
Shadow in groups politics, harmless releases, gossip, revenge fantasies, dark humor, release tension of seeming perfect.
But dangerous releases. Drawn to leaders who vent the dark side we secretly feel. They say we wouldn't dare. Group setting gives license to project, vent spleen on scapegoats.
Idealizing leader cause, free to act ways normally avoided. Demagogues exaggerate threats, paint black-white, stir fears, insecurities, desires for revenge, underground, ready to explode in group. More such leaders with more repression.
He also highlights shadow and contradictory behavior. People with emphatic traits, unusual confidence, niceness, morality, toughness, intellect, that seems like strengths.
Often a slight exaggeration, performing, laying it on too thick.
Reality. Emphatic trait often rests on top of the opposite trait, concealing it.
Two forms. Sensing early softness develops toughness as shell, or has antisocial quality, ambition, develops pro-social niceness to cover.
Hone public image over years. Underlying trait, weakness antisocial, is repressed shadow. Greater repression, greater volatility, aging stress cracks appear, playing extreme role tiring, real self, rebels, moods, obsessions, secret vices, behavior contrary to image, often self-destructive.
So be wary people too quick to term befriend, too nice accommodating, extreme niceness, never natural, keep distance, look for passive-aggressive comments, malicious gossip, reveals shadow, you'll be next.
Right. And the fanatic, fervor impressive, speaks forcefully, no compromise, promises greatness, radiates strength, gains followers, flair for drama.
But at key moment, unexpectedly slip up. Indecisive, burnout, ill-conceived actions, as if they secretly wanted to fail. Emphatic conviction covers deep insecurity doubt. Shadow.
That's the idea, to integrate it. Explore the shadow, then show the shadow.
Yeah.
Explore, depths contain creative energy, primitive thinking, dark impulses.
Contrast kids' fluid minds with older minds tightened by data stats. Free association, dreams seem irrational, sterile thinking. Unconscious shadow has powers creative people tap into.
Use a checkoff again. Bored, depressed, writer's block, trek to Sakhalin Island prison colony, ghastly conditions, fascination with abject society since childhood, connected him to something real, reignited generous mood, unearthed dark qualities within, rigid, overly moralistic, reconnected with other half, honest with self-channeled shadow creatively, depression block lifted.
Process. Re-examine earlier self. Traits drummed out by parent spears. Weaknesses, vulnerabilities, interests not liked, emotions ashamed of. Parents steered you their way. Rediscover lost, authentic parts.
Then, show the shadow. We secretly suffer social codes. Be nice, agree, don't show confidence, seem humble. Gain comfort fitting in, but become defenseful. Niceness becomes habit. Timidity, lack of confidence, indecision.
Shadow shows unconsciously in explosive fits, detrimentally. Better to release consciously, safely. Gossip, dark humor, fantasies.
Those relatively harmless releases, yeah. He also introduces the primal inclination. Finding your calling, linking it back to purpose, highlights its importance as a deep guide. Uses Chanel again, finding calling using Carable's false purpose. But how to find your specific inclination isn't detailed in this excerpt, though its significance is clear.
Okay, so to wrap things up then, this deep dive into these excerpts from Robert Greene's The Laws of Human Nature, it really gives you a powerful framework, doesn't it, for understanding those hidden forces shaping us all.
It absolutely does. We've touched on Well, the challenges of our own irrationality and how to maybe master our emotional selves a bit better. Learn techniques for decoding those nonverbal cues people are constantly sending out. Understood the deep-seated nature of character and how even weaknesses can potentially be turned into strengths.
Yeah, and we got into the dynamics of desire, that pleasure of the chase, the
Right.
importance of confronting mortality, the powerful, sometimes dangerous pull of groups and tribalism.
The art of gaining influence, not by force, but by validating others. That crucial difference between false purposes and finding a genuine inner calling.
We talked about developing authority through vision and strategy, sensing the times through generational patterns, integrating masculine and feminine qualities for more fluidity.
And understanding and consciously channeling that shadow side, rather than letting it run rampant destructively.
And this understanding, it's not just, academic theory, it's presented as a practical tool, a lens maybe, to navigate the complexities of relationships, work, the world, with more clarity, more effectiveness.
And maybe even, dare I say it, a deeper sense of realistic compassion for yourself and for others, knowing what we're all grappling with underneath. If you found this overview engaging, you really should dive into the full book. It's even richer, much more detailed.
Definitely recommend it.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on. If human nature, with all its potential for this deep irrationality, this powerful tribalism, this hidden aggression, if it's as deeply ingrained as Greene suggests these laws imply, what does that really mean for our ability to genuinely change ourselves, or even our collective ability to build a fundamentally different, maybe better society? Is real change possible against these forces? Something to mull over